Good. Glad to be in Texas. See? Isn't that amazing? God doesn't make any mistakes. 85 million people, they say, were in that storm from Kentucky all the way to the East Coast. 26 inches, Central Park in New York. Wow. We're going to continue this morning and for the next couple of weeks on loving your neighbor and what that looks like. The first two times we got together, of course, last week we had our Sanctity of Human Life, and we had Sandra Decker and the group from Abortion Hurts, God Heals, come in and give a couple testimonies. I hope that you were blessed by that. It's one of those things where we don't always feel comfortable talking about. It's not fun to look at because it's very, very graphic, very, very emotional, highly dividing, but necessary because that's where truth lies. We talk an awful lot about Jesus giving us spiritual life, but physical life is very, very important and sacred. And we know that there are millions upon millions of women in particular, but men as well, who have been impacted by that issue and suffer some from that, and some have been freed and forgiven. They've all been forgiven, but some have experienced that freedom and that forgiveness. But before that, we had a couple times we talked about this area of what are we going to do in 2016 differently. And I wanted to roll the ball out and kind of get us thinking about outward. Not just coming to a place like this and sitting and hearing somebody talk, but actually thinking more about why and what and how. And the first two times we got together, it was a little bit more theoretical and maybe theological on what it means to be a good neighbor, who our neighbor is. And as followers of Jesus, I think it's important for us to constantly remind ourselves we are representatives. The scriptures call us ambassadors. And if any of you are in sales or if you're representing somebody else, like as you go out in the public, you represent Communion Chapel, you represent Jesus Christ, you are giving first impressions. Always remember that you are a living gospel. Okay? You say things from time to time, but you're living it. And people hear you, people see you, especially the little ones, in your own home. So that's why I think it's so ironic, because people act certain ways at church like we do now, and then we go home, it's a different story. And we've got to fight that issue of hypocrisy, double standards, double-mindedness, and thinking that God doesn't care about interacting and interrelating our lives. You don't want to compartmentalize your life. There's no Sunday morning Christians. I mean, there are, but that's not what we're shooting for. We want you to be integrated in everything that you do, private and public. And so as we go out there and represent Him, we really need to do a good job of doing our homework. Who are we representing? And the question I asked a couple weeks ago is, do you know what the heart of Jesus really is? What is His heart? His passion? What really makes Him operate? Well, we talked about the fact we don't have to guess, because in Matthew 11:29, He tells us Himself where His heart is. He says, my heart is gentle and it's humble. That's who I am. And so we need to be thinking about that for ourselves as we represent Him and as we treat other people. So if we do that, then we see how He Himself lived it out. Look at what we just sung about. Jesus submitted Himself, humbled Himself before His Father to come to earth, to become like us, and to die on a cross. That was His task. Born to die. And yet He was willing to do that because He knew that if He didn't die, we couldn't live. That's how much he loves us. That was his heart. And then we also saw in John 13, the upper room, where Jesus unexpectedly washed his disciples' feet. Very, very humbling. People of his stature didn't do that. That's what servants did. And yet he told them, I'm doing this as an example for you, because that's what I want you to go out and do to others. Serve them. And so we talk a lot about servant leadership. You lead by loving. You lead by serving. You lead by example. Not because you're the smartest or the brightest or the strongest or the most experienced. That has its place. That gives you competence. But we're talking about the heart of Jesus and how we are to be reflecting that. And so Paul picked up on this huge in Philippians chapter 2. The theologians call this the kenosis passage, the emptying of himself. What does that look like? Well, it says here in chapter 2 of Philippians, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind. Let each of you regard one another as more important than himself. That's huge. That is really huge for a lot of people who are so self-centric. The universe revolves around them. And now you're saying consider others as more important? For unbelievers, that's a natural state. For Christians, it should not be, but it still can be a reality for us. Somehow, as Christians, we think we get a pass in life. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests. So you're not to neglect yourself, but also have the interest of others. And then he says in verse 5, have this attitude, an ongoing attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. Humility, thinking of others as more important. Did he not say that I came to serve, to give my life a ransom? Not to be served, which would have been appropriate, but to serve others. That should be our attitude as we walk through our daily life. Now, throughout the scriptures, we find that God has a real soft spot in his heart for those who have been living lives of humility. And I think we showed this list before, but if you look at it again, you'll probably see yourself somewhere on there. I know I did. Can y'all see those? Okay. Obviously, there are those who have found themselves humbled for a lot of reasons. Orphaned, adopted, left out, left behind, unpopular. Remember high school? Remember junior high? Remember braces and glasses? Man, kids are cruel. You find yourself on the outside. Maybe you always haven't had financial means. Maybe you have had poor things. Maybe you have had to struggle with material possessions. Prisoners, outcasts. I mean, you could find all kinds. This is not a definitive list, but somewhere you can see where you've been there. We all have. And yet, these and others like that, where we've been, Jesus considers those to be our neighbors. That's our target audience. Now, down and out is one thing. And you see them right here. There are also people who are what we consider up and out. They've been born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They've been privileged all their lives. They've been catered to. They've been entitled to. They still don't know Jesus. Rich or poor doesn't make any difference. No matter what economic class you've come from, what racial background you have. Jesus sets all those free and puts them on equal ground, especially at the foot of the cross. So these are things you already know. When the lawyer came to Jesus and tested him, and he said, what is the greatest of the commandments? And you know those because we're going to operate on those. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the one is like the first. You love your neighbors. You love your neighbor as yourself. Well, the scriptures say that the lawyer kind of wanted to justify himself and said, okay. And so he said, like he always does, who's my neighbor? Isn't it interesting how Jesus responded to that direct question with an indirect answer? He said, let me tell you a story. And he tells the very well-known story of the good neighbor, the Good Samaritan. And the reason it's the Good Samaritan is because that cultural divide between Samaritans and Jews was probably as great as anything we could come up with now, as far as prejudice or class distinctions or what life matters. And so instead of identifying who my neighbor is, which really the answer is everybody, he said, how am I supposed to act as a good neighbor? So he throws it on to us. How are we supposed to act as good neighbors towards our neighbors? And then he gives us the story, and we see what the Samaritan did. Took the initiative, observed and saw. Because we saw the other two religious guys walk right past, did we not? Great stock evaluation for religion. They see him and say, they're not one of us. They don't meet our criteria, our acceptance. And so we bypass them. Samaritan didn't see all that, and he went right to him, bound up his wounds, stopped the bleeding, anointed him with oil, gave him transportation. We talked all about that before. Took him to the inn, gave him his credit card, said, I'll come back and we'll pay for this. That's what good neighbors do. And some of you do that better than others, okay? That's just the reality. So what I'm saying here is wherever you are, I want you to think about turning the wick up a little bit higher and thinking, Lord, I think there's probably more to this than what I'm currently doing. And again, we talked about this in a humorous way, and it always seems to be that between Rosemary and I. I said, if you don't know how to do it well, marry somebody who does. And she does. And so that's always been my social in. I just send her up front, and she warms up the crowd, then I step in, and they go, oh, you're Rosemary's husband. And that's been my life for the last 40 years, okay? And that's okay. I've learned it's humbled me, but it's okay. Because you got to play to your strength sometimes. And so as we look at this, I want to start looking a little bit more today in the more practical, hands-on, daily stuff. And so we'll talk a little bit more about specifics. And I really want you to think about yourself, because I'm going to ask you some questions right now. And I want you to kind of ponder them, because they're pretty good questions, if I may say so myself. Let's start about this. What if God placed you where you are on purpose and for a purpose? What if God placed you where you are on purpose and for a purpose? Do you know what that is? Secondly, let me kind of follow that up. Do you think God's working in your life is intentional or accidental? Okay? We talk about God being sovereign, being totally in charge of everything all the time, anyway, anyhow. So when he works in your life, is God working intentionally, on purpose, or is it just some kind of random accident? If he's working intentionally, then we need to know kind of what that looks like. Second question. What if where you live? Do you know where you all live? I live at 3215 Hitching Post. We are now at 5719 Mobud. Y'all know where you live? Okay? Where you live is part of God's larger plan to reveal himself to others through you. Now, coming up as a Campus Crusade kid in college, we were always told, God loves you. He has a wonderful plan for your life. And that's true. But part of his larger plan is he wants to use you in the lives of other people. That's the part we're kind of focusing in on this morning. What are we doing as part of God's bigger picture for us, involves others, reaching out, touching somebody, and impacting them. What if we took seriously the responsibility of the Great Command? It almost seems like the easier part is loving God with all that we have, and now we're supposed to love others as ourselves. And that may be the rub. You say, well, I don't even like my neighbor. Where do we find in Scripture that God says you have to like everybody? But we are supposed to love everybody, are we not? And there is a difference. There is a difference. Because you love them with the love of Christ who loved you first. We love because he first loved us. He gives us the capacity and the power to do that. Even if you have to go past the liking part. Because sometimes that may be just very superficial, very minute. And sometimes those are things that can be overcome. You can learn to love people. You really can. Now, if you were to love your neighbor as yourself, do you think that might impact your neighborhood, where you live? Some of you live on cul-de-sacs. Some of you live on streets and street corners. Some of your streets are highly trafficked. Some of them aren't trafficked at all. Some of you may live in apartments, and so you've got complexes all around you. That's your neighborhood. Then you think about your workplace. Where are you in the marketplace? And then where do you go out and shop and stuff like that? You've got your places all around you that you frequent quite a bit. That's your sphere of influence. You're coming and you're going. Will that be impacted if we took seriously that responsibility of loving others like we're supposed to? And if it affects your neighborhood, do you think it might have an impact on the kingdom, on eternity? Could it possibly be that God could use you in a way to change somebody else's forever? Wouldn't that be neat? Has it ever happened? Think about your life as a believer. Have you ever been at ground zero and saw and heard somebody come to faith because you opened your mouth, took the initiative to love somebody, to tell them the truth about Jesus? If you have, it's a blessing. It's really something that gives you an adrenaline rush in some respects, because you think, God used me to talk to somebody else, and they've been brought into the kingdom. They believed. It's not like you did anything special. You didn't study real hard on your gospel presentation. They may have been just really, really ripe fruit, and all you had to do is, and it would have fallen right off the vine, right off the branch. That's okay. That's what being available for God to use you is all about. You never know. You're just supposed to be obedient and to follow him and love others. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Let's sing it all together. Dusty Springfield, right? Way back in your rear view mirror. But you remember, because the whole world needs another love song. McCartney. When we start talking about spiritual projects, where do we need to start? We need to pray. We really need to pray. Where do you live, and do you know the people around you? Start praying for people in your neighborhood. Pray that God would give you a burden for people you maybe not haven't even met yet. People who are right around you, say, Lord, I've got neighbors. We share this part of San Antonio, this zip code. I want to be obedient to you. I want to be available to you. I don't even know some of these folks. Begin to burden my heart to get to know them. You don't even have a plan. You don't even have a strategy. But you start to pray and soften the soil of your soul. And do that. And then it's possible, here's something very, very practical. Take a prayer walk in your neighborhood. Some of you may walk. Rosemary and I do. We walk at different times. I walk in the early mornings when it's still dark, when nobody sees me, except for the street lamps. Okay? It's the way I walk. Rosemary walks a little bit later in the morning, probably 8, 9 o'clock, whenever, when the sun's up. And a lot of people see her walking, which is a good thing because then they talk to her and she talks to them and she gets to know them all. I still don't know who my neighbors are, but she knows them. And she tries to pull me in on that and introduce me to them. And it's kind of working, sort of, kind of. But get out in your neighborhood and pray. Go by. When you look at a house with an address on there, you say, Lord, I don't know what's going on behind those doors. But I pray for that family. And just keep on walking. It's amazing what the Lord will do. I want to show you what happened in my situation when I did that very thing before Christmas. As I was thinking about this whole thing and talking about this topic, I said, Lord, I'm driving down my own street. And I'm looking at these houses. I go, I don't know these folks. And I said, give me a burden. Give me some opportunities. You know who I am. You know how I'm wired. But I want to get past that if I can. So help me. Pray for those opportunities. And then sometimes you'll need to take the initiative. Okay, let me tell you something about what happened in our house. I did the same thing. I prayed. And it wasn't but 2 days later. I think I may have told the story. I was out in the backyard minding my own business with a privacy fence. And all of a sudden I hear this voice come over the top and a dog barking, and one of the privacy fence slats, pickets was out. The dog was in there just... And he said, that's right, dog won't bite. I said, yeah, right. And so we started talking. I got to meet David for the very first time. I said, why don't we get back together again? He says, sure. I think I told you 5 minutes later he's knocking on my door with the dog in a leash. And he said, they introduced themselves. He tells me, and they're right next door to us, right next door. 3 single guys. I still don't know the backstory on any of this. But I met David. And he told me about some stuff. And in that conversation, he had heard that I was a minister. And he started telling me about his religious background. Pretty much unsolicited. Why? I asked God to give me an opportunity to meet my neighbors. He brought one to me, to my front door. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it could if you start praying like that. And if you start getting out in the neighborhood, just walking and looking like you're minding your own business. You may see somebody out washing their car, cutting their grass, pulling weeds, taking out the trash, and you just say, hey, hi, my name is. Not that hard. Every one of you here, I think, could do that. And you could start something, or God could be starting something on your behalf as long as you took a step forward and say, God, here I am. Can you use me? So obviously I can use you. Just get off the inertia. Get the thing moving. So we'll see what we can do together. Loving your neighbors as yourself, because God is part of the great command. Okay? Because you love him, he loves you. He wants you to represent him, to love others. Well, not only do we have that thing going, but there was a couple that we knew, an elderly couple. She died several years ago. He died a couple months ago. Went to his funeral service. Got to meet some of his family, his grown children. The house went up for sale, one of the nicer homes in our neighborhood. And found out that they wanted to bulldoze the house and put up a 16-bed Alzheimer's unit. Therefore, they had to do some rezoning. But guess what? They had to get permission from the homeowners association. So we had meetings after meetings after meetings talking about taking down a single family unit, which was a very nice one, and putting up this other one. There's all kinds of arguments on both sides, and you could see through some of the veiled excuses and propositions and things like that. Basically, the neighborhood said, no, we don't want that. Well, instead of it be your word against our words, how many of your people in the neighborhood care about this house? And so the San Antonio councilman said, get some petitions, get some signatures. So guess how you do that? You walk through the neighborhood. Excuse me, here's a proposition, and you talk to them, and you get to know your neighbors. Now again, guess who the tip of the spear was for the Pratts? On the coldest day and the rainiest day, she's out there doing that. And I'm driving behind her in a car. I'm good support. Went to the door a couple times with an umbrella when the hail was coming down at that time. But they already knew her because of other things. You're the girl who walked. Yes, I'm the one. And so that happened. We got to know. Now we've got a list of people's addresses and names and emails and phone numbers. And we're saying, we'll get back to you. So that's the beginning of the story. I don't know how the end of the story is going to happen yet. But all I'm saying is we prayed. We asked God to bring about situations. I don't know what your situation is going to be like, but all of a sudden, we've got access to the lives of people. And then what we do with that and what God does with that is still to be told. But I was excited because we'd been there for a long time. But I got to tell you one little thing on the special part. Back in 1992, when we first got into the neighborhood, immediately I met a guy who worked in a newspaper here in San Antonio. Told me flat out he was an atheist. I said, oh. I said, well, we probably don't have a whole lot to talk about then. And he made it very clear. He didn't want to know about God. And that was it. Up until, for all that time until now, we're talking 10 plus years, we kind of waved at each other as we went past each other's houses and stuff like that. This petition, this guy started to be kind of like the ramrod, the chairman of this thing. All of a sudden, a common enemy, a common cause brought us together again. Now John and I are trying to get close. And guess what? We're going to have to talk about Jesus sometime about this. That's something you can pray for me about. Because John's already twisted the knife a couple times when we've gotten together and say, well, maybe we ought to, Mike, why don't you pray? Because I'm not going to pray and it's not going to do any good anyway. So the fuse is already lit. But I get to go back and reconnect with John, my atheist neighbor. But I asked that. That's what I asked for the Lord. I didn't know who or how or what, but he's opening up these doors for me to walk through. But I need to walk through, do I not? It's not going to just stand there and twiddle my thumbs. I want to walk through. So I'll hope to give you some report. I don't know how long it's going to take because this is a relationship that's going to take a crock pot kind of approach. It's going to maybe take some time, but it may not. God may do something real special. Which brings me to the next situation. Common ground. Short term, when we take the initiative to seek a relationship, we're trying to find common ground. I mean, this is not really rocket science, but if you do get a chance to walk through your neighborhood, if you do get a chance to see a neighbor, and you say hi, and they maybe stop, and they may give you a little bit of time, man, what can you talk about? Well, everybody came from some place. Okay? Some of you may have been born and raised in San Antonio. A lot of us have not. So you came from someplace, you got here somehow, and that could be a point of conversation. You all had families, moms and dads, good, bad, or indifferent, maybe siblings. Okay? Maybe you have children. All those are points of contact to find common ground. And so as you talk about those things, you may find that there's a lot more in common than you realize. You all have jobs, most of us do, hobbies, vocations, even if you're retired. Excuse me. Those are things that you could talk about. Now, you don't have to go in depth, you don't have to be definitive, but you could be just sharing stuff. You go, huh, I didn't know that. And it may lead to do you mind if we get together again? I mean, I just live right around the corner, or I'm down here, and oh yeah, I know where you live. Maybe we just get together. Would that be okay with you? Yeah. And then some of you may be so bold, say, based on what we've talked about, is there anything I could pray for you about? Pray for me? You do that? Oh, yeah. You may find out that their runaway daughter, their addicted son, the multiple divorces, all those things that are part of real life, maybe they would say, you do that for me. And you're thinking in the back of your mind, this is what neighbors do. Neighbors do these things for other neighbors. And how much money have we spent so far? But it is time. It is time. Now, when we do that, obviously when we interact with people that we don't know that well, I'm going to tell you as Christian brothers and sisters, please don't be predetermined in your perspective. Because they may say words, they may give you concepts, they may do things that may seem shocking to a church person. That's a 4-letter word. Don't freak out. If you're talking to an unbeliever, guess what? They're going to act and think like an unbeliever. Okay? Be prepared for that. It's part of the battle. If you shrink back and go, we don't say that in our house. Our kids in their, you go, wow, what kind of world do you live in? So just be flexible, be open, and it's just initial. Time will take care of some of the other things that bring the differences maybe closer together. But that's great because you can even pray about those things too. Lord, how do I approach this? So it's just being a good neighbor because why? You're interested in them. It's not about you. It never should be about you when you do this. It's saying, Lord, how can you use me to impact other people, to influence other people? Let me be a good listener. I don't need to dominate the talk. I want to hear. And I want to hear with a sensitive heart, a humble heart. I want to show you a video clip. I want to show you how some people who look at their neighborhood and look behind closed doors and find out what they feel is their responsibility. I think it'll resonate quite a bit with you. Can we show that first video clip?
We've lived here a long time. We've lived here a long time. We actually do know quite a few of our neighbors. Although we know people and we've chatted, outside and while they're working on the lawn, something like that. That's about the only time really that you do get to see a neighbor is like in better weather when you're outside. We're really running all the time, busy, busy, busy. We've got our days filled. And I think learning to stop and listen to someone and talk to someone for a few minutes, those kinds of things seem really hard. We just want to keep going. And you know what? It's important. One of the ideas we had was a block party. It was kind of unusual for us because we're not the most adept people at entertaining, especially big groups, and we're not organizers. That was the big thing. So many people wanted to participate. I mean, vast majority. I just think people are hungry for relationship, neighborhood type things. Some of the people that jumped in the most, or just as much as anyone else, were non-believers that just thought, yes, let's do this. They were just very enthusiastic and neighborly types. My heart just went out to several families because I was just, found out what they were going through. And I didn't know. A family I thought I knew fairly well. The wife had just gone through cancer treatment. And I had missed that whole span, of her going through it. And I didn't even know. I felt just badly about it, You have people around you that are important, that need to be known. You can run around your busy life and it's like you're trying to find something else. And people are right before you that need your attention, that God's calling you to give your time to.
What I realized from doing this was just how many needs there were. You would drive up and down the street, you would realize what a nice neighborhood, but in each house there was a story, unique needs people had, and I really learned that as we scratched deeper that there was a lot to pray for.
I've thought that we needed to involve the others that we know that are believers in our neighborhood even more, and try to maybe get together and talk and pray about this, so that we could help each other meet some needs in the neighborhood. You can get caught up in maintenance and work, and maintenance and the work you do, and I don't want to turn around someday and find out I just did maintenance and work and I didn't do some very important things in my life.
She doesn't seem to be a two-headed monster. She seems like a regular kind of person. Work, maintenance, schedule, busy, but people were important. And it's important maybe to take that kind of time. So if we do find common ground, I think it would be important. Maybe a block party would work for you. Ice cream social, tailgate, barbecue. You could use maybe an opportunity for a sporting event if that's something you really like. Find out that could be something in your conversation that you find that you have common ground in. All those things could lead one to another, the next step, the next opportunity. Along the practical lines, once we have common ground after we've been praying, then you may have opportunities to meet needs. Meeting needs. Have you ever had somebody come alongside you at a kind of a special time and helped you get up in the saddle, just kind of give you a boost? Somebody who maybe met your need when you just couldn't quite have enough resources at the right time or the energy to do it, and somebody came alongside and met your need. How did you feel? Could we do that for somebody else? Could we be givers? Can we fight the tendency to be takers? That's what this command is all about, to love others as ourselves. In 1 Peter, let me go back. There is a verse I want to read, 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 23. I think I've got it up there. Can you see that, some of you? 1 Corinthians 9. Paul, I love this passage because Paul, when you start looking at his ministry, you think, well, he's a superstar. Everything he does and everything he touches should come to fruition. But he's very flexible. I love his realism. He says, for though I am free from all men, meaning in Christ, he does not have to depend on other men for the things of eternity. But, he says, I made myself a slave to all. He's a servant. That I may win some. And so to the Jew I became a Jew. Those who were under the law, I became as those under the law. I'm not under the law myself, but I acted like I was for their sake, that I might win those who are in that situation. To those who are without the law, the unbelievers, I became as one like them. Not that they acted like them, but he understood them and he accepted them as they were, so that he could win those who have no law at all. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. And this is how he closes it out. I have become all things to all men, that by all means I save some. I love that attitude. Flexible, willing, being able to be adaptable. No matter who or what you come across, it's about them. It's not about us, because God's our sufficiency. So we can give freely because God has already given to us what we need forever and ever. So the next verse I want to share with you is in 1 Peter 2, verse 12. Peter says this, keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may on account of your good deeds, as they observe them, may glorify God. See, unbelievers have a viewpoint of you as Christians. I don't know exactly categorically what that is, but you're a little bit off center. All of you are, just because of the fact that you believe in an unseen God and a Jesus you've never met, and you talk about faith and you pray, and how's that going to help you at all? They don't understand it. To them, it's foolishness. It does not make sense. John, my atheist neighbor, he thinks it's the most ridiculous waste of time. For us, that's who we are. But that's the whole point. As we encounter them, they may think about us, but they can't necessarily fight us for the good deeds that we might do. So that's where our actions sometimes speak louder than words. Random acts of kindness, unsolicited. Why would you do that? Because I'm your neighbor. I care about you, and because I care, I want to do this. Now, some of you are very giving, and some of you already do this. Maybe this is very intuitive. But for a lot of us, we need to be reminded and keep that thing on the front burner. Because what is valuable? What is important in this world? What will last after this is all over? The Word of God and people. Where should we invest our time and energy? In material things that thieves will break in and steal and rob and destroy? Or things that God has invested His eternity into, His Word and people. And that's our point. Jesus didn't die for stuff. He died for people. We are people. Our neighbors are people. We are to love them. And this is how we express that love. I want to show another quick clip. Very specific, very practical. Listen to how they approach this, and then we'll wrap it up.
When you have a neighbor that comes to you and says, we really want a bigger house or need a bigger house, but we love our neighborhood, we love this neighborhood so much we can't move, it says something about the people around you. It says something about the fact that the efforts you've put in or the efforts others are putting in are actually paying off.
We had a neighbor who suffered from cancer, and Ken offered to bring dinner over once a week while he was going through all the chemo and so forth, just to let his wife have a break.
And she said, you don't need to do that. And I said, you're right, I don't need to do this, but it's something I want to do. It's something you can just on Tuesday nights, you don't have to worry about fixing dinner when you get home from work after struggling all day. You spend the evening with Jim, and I'll come over and bring dinner. And we did that until Jim passed away. And it was just something we do because I was fixing dinner anyway. What's the difference if I put enough more on for two more people? So it would be easier some days just to pull in the garage, shut the door down. But I want to get to know people. It means that, hey, I see him out there shoveling for his backyard so it'll grow better, and it's a hot day. I'm driving home. I want to go in and grab a glass of lemonade or a glass of ice water, and I pick up my shovel and my wheelbarrow and I meet him out in the street and say, hey, let's get this done. Sometimes I don't want to do it. I've even done that when I had places to be. So for me to sacrifice that and to be a little bit late to what I had planned and to help somebody out is more important to me. I was thinking about it just this morning. I let somebody go ahead of me. I was going to get a donut. And I waited for them. I opened the door, let them go in front of me, and stand in line in front of me even. So, and at the end of it, I thought, well, it was 15, 20 seconds extra that I stood. If I can't give 15 or 20 seconds to somebody, what kind of love is that? What kind of person am I if I can't give somebody 15 or 20 seconds of my time? And in the same respect with your neighbors who you know that much better, what is it if I give them 15 or 20 minutes? It's not a lot on my part, but with our neighbor who was sick and just taking dinner, it was 5 minutes of my time tops, but it meant so much to them because it was something that met a need in their life.
And I think that's what God's called us to do, is love others.
I think that's what God wants us to do. to love others. Amen? What's 15 minutes? You know where we're going with this. This is not that difficult. It really comes down to just obedience. Saying, God, what is it that I'm here for? We know it's more than taking up space. We know that it's more than accumulation of stuff. Big screen TVs, nice furniture, all the things that give us creature comforts. I'm not totally against that. But you've got to have something more than that. If that's the end, then you are buying into the culture that who dies with the most toys wins. And that's so much of a lie. It's people. You just take a meal over once a week just to give the wife a break to enjoy her dying husband. See, it comes down to things just like that. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. But you need to ask the question, Lord, what do you want me to do? I've already got neighbors. You already live at an address. What are we going to do with those people right there? Maybe your house could be a lighthouse, a beacon of hope, a place of safety, a place where they know truth resides. These are regular people. You can tell they are living in regular places. Nothing exceptional. They're us. We can do this if we choose to. And that's all I'm asking. So, as we close, the Lord has called us to this. That's declared in Scripture. Now the question is, are we accepting that call? Pray for boldness. That's where we got to start with prayer. Say, Lord, I don't know. I know it, but it just isn't working. Help me even in my unbelief. Help me in my disobedience. Help me to do something that's in my wheelhouse, something that's in my sweet spot, something that I can do. Just give me opportunities, Lord. I want to be able to walk through that open door that you open. A dozen cookies, helping somebody cut their grass, digging a hole, spreading dirt. I don't know what it is, but it could be something that could open up a relationship. Stepping out in that faith as you pray and as you see that door open up, don't just look at it, go through it and see what God has for you. Making yourself available and then basically saying as you pray, Lord, speak through me. I don't have this script. I don't have an agenda. I just want to be obedient and have you use me. The second part of the Great Commandment is to love others, but it's all predicated on your love for the Lord. And that may be, for some of us, something to reconsider too. How much do we love the Lord? It's real simple to me, and I think I came to this because it's so concise. If you love God, you obey God. He doesn't care about how much you talk. He doesn't care about you being here. Doesn't compare all those things. The most important thing is not your presence and your appearance and your presentation to others, but you obey what he says he wants you to do. That's the key. It's really how you show your love to Jesus, is you just keep my commandments. That's it. That's why the kids understand it. It's so simple. So next week we're going to pick up on part 2 of this practical outworking of our faith. And I'm literally talking about your neighborhood. Now you can expand it to your workplace and to other places where you go, but think about your neighbors, literally. And ask yourself as you drive home today, do I know the people on my right, on my left, 2 houses down, across the street? Do I know their names? Do I know their story? How long have I been living here? And when will it ever change? I know I'm kind of pushing for some of you, because some of you just love your privacy. Some of you just love your isolation. Some of you love being busy enough to not do some of the things we should be doing. Get over it. I hate saying that, but get over it. It's not about us. It's not about our stuff. It's about loving others. Because is it not about eternity? Is it not about what happens when we die and where we go? Is it not about the commission that we've been given? And if we can do that, God's blessings will pour down on us like rain. And we will be able to experience the joy that He's always intended for His children. We can do this. I know we can. And I would love for you to try to work this thing out. And when things happen, I'd love for you to report back, because we want to share how God is using this in the near future. As we start out a new year. Okay? New year, new beginnings, new stuff. This may be something that's you've never done before. Let's test God and see what He will do that with us. Yeah, Q&A.
But I was thinking as we were listening to this and how important and the points are great. The only point that I feel that we could, if we just can't do it, is to start practicing on us here. You know, when a member is ill or lonely or whatever, practice. Not telling them the gospel if you don't want to, or you know they're Christians, but do something that will, let them know about brotherly love, and that will teach them.
So you're assuming we're all neighbors to one another, which is a good assumption, because we are. We are. Okay, I'm going to pray and have the guys come forward. Part of this loving one another is, again, obedience in all areas of our lives. And that's going to be something we can talk about at another time.